including Magui and Sagaing regions. It continued to use its long-practiced four-cut strategies, known as Pia, and has edited internet and phone blackouts, water and electricity cuts, and the blockage of humanitarian assistance. Villagers has been summarily executed, some bound and shot or hanged from trees. Other has been tortured and disappeared. Home has been torched, property has been looted, and thousands of people have been driven from hiding. In the Sagaing region alone, at least 120 villagers, including 6 children, has been killed. The High Commissioner's written update described the situation of Myanmar as a human rights catastrophe. I see 3 parts to be this catastrophes. First, the military junta crime against the people of Myanmar. Second, the complete impunity with which they continue to commit these crimes. And third, the international community's continued failure to act. After 8 months, there has been a General Assembly resolution, 2 Human Rights Council resolutions, multiple UN reports, and Security Council presidential statement. Yet, there has been no decisive action. While UN member states continue their deliberations, Myanmar's villages burned. In the face of this inaction, the people of Myanmar has been forced to protect themselves in a defensive revolution. Crucially, all defensive action must respect international human rights law and international humanitarian law provisions. The NUG is committed to creating a unified chain of command amongst people defense forces, consistent with the established code of conduct that all democratic armed forces has been instructed to comply with. The NUG and the people of Myanmar has also taken clear action towards accountability. The NUG has accepted the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court dating back to 1st July 2002 and will support other accountability bodies, including the Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar, IIMM. In closing, in the context of this council, I share 5 priority actions. Number 1, we must intensify our pressure on the international community to act. Our imperative must be to save lives and to stop the atrocities. The NUG continues to urge the Security Council to immediately resume its address of the situation of Myanmar, which constitutes a threat to the international peace and security. The Security Council must adopt a resolution that demands the release of political detainees and the restoration of democracy, impose targeted sanctions against the military leadership, enforce a global arms embargo, and pursue accountability for perpetrators. Number 2, the Human Rights Council and the UN member states ensure that UN agencies, funds, and programs deliver urgent humanitarian assistance to conflict-affected part of Myanmar using land corridor from neighboring countries, as well as by air and sea. This must be done in partnership with the NUG in ways that do not account legitimacy to the military junta. Number 3, the Human Rights Council must strengthen its attention on Myanmar, prioritizing atrocity prevention and accountability. Its deliberation must be informed by victims and the civil society, and its debates and decisions must involve the NUG as a legitimate representative of the Myanmar people. Number 4, The Human Rights Council and UN member states should provide the NUG and the Ministry of Human Rights with resources and technical assistance to support its accountability efforts. This includes strengthening the capacity to contribute to the work of OHCHR, the WIWM, and the special procedures, and to engage with the International Criminal Court. Number 5. Finally, the Human Rights Council and UN member states must take every available action to prevent military reprisal against persons who contribute to the work of the Council and its mechanism. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister Myo. Just before we go to the next speaker, I also would like to let everyone know that the event is also being live streamed on Forum Asia's YouTube channel, Twitter and Facebook accounts. You can also send in questions on any of these platforms or using the Q&A function on Zoom. Our next speaker is Dr. Troy. Dr. Troy will not come on video for security reasons, which again is an indication of the threats that human rights defenders, especially in Myanmar, face right now. But we would like to hear from Dr. Troy about the current situation on the ground. Dr. Troy.
Hello, good evening and good morning, everyone. It's a great honor to be here to talk about the present basic human rights situation in Myanmar. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for this briefing section for inviting me here today. I'm Dr. Troy, a member of Myanmar Doctors for Human Rights Network and a volunteer doctor working at clandestine charity clinics in Burma. Imagine living in a country where you are being hunted down by your military just because you saved the lives of your fellow countrymen. Imagine being a doctor in a country where volunteers are lured with fake COVID-related emergencies and then arbitrarily detained. Imagine your family members are being threatened just because you are a healthcare worker who has participated in the protest. These are only a few examples of countless events happening in Myanmar every day since the coup on February 1. The medical profession is globally regarded as one of the noblest and most humane professions because of its guided by human virtues such as altruism, compassion, and the desire to alleviate human suffering. This is especially true when the global COVID-19 pandemic hit many parts of the world. The medical staff have risked their lives in caring for the infected patients. However, healthcare workers in Myanmar are targeted, abducted, tortured, and even murdered for saving lives. According to WHO, Myanmar is the most dangerous country in the world for healthcare workers, with 260 attacks this year, nearly 40% of the 664 globally tracked. This is by far the highest of any country. Today, I would like to focus on the following from the perspective of a doctor. Number 1, why doctors join the CDM. Number 2, systematic targeting on healthcare system. Number 3, taking advantage of the surge in COVID-19 pandemic. And number 4, our recommendations. Firstly, why doctors join the CDM? After the coup, a campaign that has seen thousands of professionals such as doctors, teachers, lawyers, and engineers go on strike, refusing to work under military rule, which is known as Civil Disobedience Movement or CDM. Doctors participated in this protest. They are the people who have been at the front lines during the global COVID-19 pandemic. We are doctors saving lives, not politicians, nor perpetrators. As doctors striving to save as many lives as possible, it is unfathomable to work under a murderous regime that has shown a great disregard for human lives and fundamental human rights. The armed forces did not show a speck of regret or sorrow after taking human lives effortlessly at gunpoint. Instead, these armed forces who were supposed to be protecting the people were seen celebrating for getting a headshot on protesters who were totally unarmed and were not the enemy. Preventing injured protesters from getting life-saving measures and targeting charity clinics and hospitals that provide critical care to the injured are the common tactics of the military junta. When we look at a siege in a town called Bago, at least 80 protesters were massacred in a single day by the armed forces on April 8. Injured civilians and dead bodies alike were horrifically taken away to hide evidence. Healthcare assistants nor medics were not allowed to enter the area, and the wounded were left unattended until their eventual deaths. Dead bodies of the protesters were not given back to the family for proper burials. Shockingly, the families were demanded a big amount of money to get the bodies returned to the families. Instead of helping those injured to get urgent medical care in time, they stripped of their fundamental human rights to access immediate life-saving treatments. Intentionally preventing doctors and medics from providing urgent medical care cost many lives tragically, which could otherwise have been saved. In addition, seeing our fellow medics performing life-saving operations get arrested, beaten, tortured, or sometimes even killed made our determination stronger. The arrested doctors who did not even participate in the protest were detained and aired on a propaganda-laden television channel, labeling them as criminals. These indiscriminate attacks on the healthcare system have led to a great deterioration of healthcare, which is already starting to collapse. We are doctors. Our job is to see patients who need our attention. We are just doing our work, and for this very reason, we are persecuted. We realize even if the doctors return to work, everything we do will be contributing to the political gains of the junta. In other words, if we keep working under the murderous regime, the junta will be allowed to run the country and kill more people. This is why many doctors join the CDM, ignoring threats and potential dangers for their own lives. The doctors are solidly united with the people and willing to sacrifice their lives for restoring democracy in Burma. We do not want the inhumane Myanmar military to be allowed to run the country for their self-interest, dragging back all the development and positive changes we have seen over the past decade. Secondly, systematic targeting on healthcare system. Nearly 600 healthcare workers were included in the warrant list. Moreover, charity clinics and volunteers working there are still being targeted. An oxygen center in Yangon that provides medical care and oxygen to the patients was raided, and the volunteers were beaten by the security forces just 2 days ago. This is the latest incident of attacking medical staff and the facilities by the junta. Because of these brutal crackdowns, some doctors are now escaping to the liberated ethnic regions and border areas. Even those doctors who are still in the large cities are also unable to provide care to those in need, but have to do it in hiding. The private and charity clinics were forced to close if they were found allowing CDM doctors to see patients there. However, the medical sector is still one of the highest number of CDMers after the educational sector. Doctors are well respected and revered in our society and thus inspire many people from their participation. Many outstanding and well-respected doctors are actively participating in the CDM, and the junta holds a grudge against them because of that. These doctors have been angrily targeted because they're trying to save the lives of many protesters whom the junta wanted to kill. We have seen incidents of the security forces raiding the hospitals, targeting and arresting the medics who have been working and serving the people, such as Professor of the Emergency Department of Yangon General Hospital, Director of National COVID-19 Vaccination Program, and many other medical volunteers. Their strategy is to demoralize the medics and destroy their will to resist. However, the junta does not realize that they are destroying the entire healthcare system in the country. They are not aware that they are doing very dangerous acts. Thirdly, taking advantage of COVID-19 pandemic. The coup fueled the COVID surge, making a situation of crisis upon crisis. COVID is ravaging every area of the country, causing people to face the economic and social consequences from it. And the third wave of COVID-19 hitting the country was practically like a tsunami, creating major havoc and having a severe impact on people's lives. Many public health officials and medics believe the huge number of deaths were because of hindrance of the security forces to healthcare works of the doctors by all means possible. Lack of trust by the public in the healthcare system under the control of the military. For example, a nationwide vaccination program was upended. Constant attacks on the healthcare workers, deceptive calls to medics on fake emergencies in order to arrest them, incompetent and mismanagement of the junta in the handling of the pandemic, and forcing of the government schools to reopen in the entire country amid a COVID surge despite warning from the people and the health experts. And finally, using COVID-19 as a weapon against the people for their own political gain. Even during oxygen crisis in Myanmar, there are saddening stories of the security forces firing shots into the air to disperse the crowds, queuing for oxygen at a plant in Yangon. Some pharmaceutical warehouses that store many essential drugs for COVID were forced to close with the false accusation of having unregistered drugs amid the worst day of the pandemic. It is completely appalling. I cannot find words to express the horrific acts and brutal crimes committed by the security forces. In conclusion, despite all our efforts, we all realize that it is not enough for the patients and we cannot continue it alone in the long run. It will be incredibly challenging for us to carry out these charity works. We need more support from the international organizations to continue our work to save lives. This is the greatest time of need for our country. Based on our careful assessment of the prevailing situation in the country, I would like to request the international communities to take actions on these recommendations. Recommendation
Dr. Troy, I think we seem to have lost you.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, the connection wasn't stable. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you well now. Yes.
Yes. So I think I've reached to the recommendations of today's briefing.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah. So our recommendation one is even if the disease is controlled in other countries, as long as COVID-19 exists in Myanmar, it can spread again to a global pandemic. The conflict and the pandemic in the country will continue for the foreseeable future, and so will the cross-border trade and refugees running away for their safety. So our first recommendation is to provide humanitarian aids, medicines, and mass vaccinations to our neighboring countries. We call for the international communities to collaborate with NGOs, ethnic health committees, and trusted local networks to deliver these aids directly to the people. UN and other international communities must make sure in every possible way to provide these aids without legitimizing or promoting credibility to the junta. Recommendation 2, we call for the international communities and UN member states to develop appropriate strategies to stop targeting and attacking the healthcare system immediately, and to ensure the protection of the medical professionals and the volunteers with the strongest possible action by the UN Security Council so that we can save lives. Recommendation 3, it is time for the international community to start considering all forms of humanitarian intervention. The junta has been allowed to run the country for over 8 months, and not a single moment have they shown any interest in the well-being of the people. Finally, to develop and introduce a proper mechanism that is not capable of not only ending the impunity, but also preventing further crimes against humanity and atrocities into the country. Since we are doctors, it is our firm belief that health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being, and we are determined to continue working until everyone has their rights to health, regardless of race, sex, nationality, ethnicity, religion, or the political spectrum in our country. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Troy. Thank you for sharing what is happening on the ground and your continuous work despite all the threats and violence. Thank you again. And we will now turn to Note 2.2. Ethnic minorities have been targeted since violence and attacks on ethnic minorities have escalated, especially since the coup, and they've borne the brunt of military's violence. So would you share a little bit about the situation the ethnic minorities are facing, especially your minority, your group, Karen? Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Good evening and good morning to everyone who are joining this event from different of the world. I would like to present about security and human rights situations in current state. The security and human rights situation in rural area of Myanmar has worsened since February 1st coup. Ground attacks in some area began shortly after the military takeover, but the airstrikes began in current state on March 27, trigger and escalations in conflict and violence, along with heightened insecurity in the region. The resumption of intense fighting has also led to a humanitarian crisis, displacement, and human rights abuse. There has been a rise in both attacks and retaliate activity by armed groups throughout current state. KHRG estimates over 30,000 people were displaced by the airstrike in Papong district alone in early May. Ground attacks and fighting have contributed to further displacements. In June, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs estimates over 100,000 people have been displaced in current state since the coup. There has been an increase in SAC troops directly fire at civilians, as well as what appear to be the deliberate killings of civilians. On April 11, SAC soldiers shot that 42-year-old villagers in Papong district where he was going to buy food. He was shot while crossing the road. He was unarmed. On September 4th, SAC soldier shot a pregnant woman and her husband who was carrying their 4-year-old daughter at 11 p.m. as they returned from fishing near their house. Earlier, around 10 days, SAC troops occupied a KNLA camps. They imposed a curfew in the local village and arbitrary arrest. Around 14 villagers were arrested because of the curfews and the nightly patrol carried out by SAC soldier. Other villagers could not go and help the family. They were only able to go at 4 a.m. next day. The woman died after the villager came to help, and her husband died 4 days later. SAC give the victim's family, victim mothers, 500,000 baht as a bribe to stay quiet, but she refused. The imposition of a curfew is being widely used to shoot at civilians without warning. A 70-year-old boy was killed on March 16 while walking along the road at 7 p.m. in the evening. The bullet hit his chest and died immediately. He was killed by a member of the, we call Pitusi, people militias, for breaking curfews, even though curfew was set at 9 p.m. by Pitusi themselves. KHRG also received multiple reports of forced labor, including portering and navigation since the coup. Men in many villages have already either gone into hiding or no longer sleep in their homes at night, since they are the primary target of forced labor demands. Afraid of being taken to do forced labor, villagers are also paying the demands replacement fees. KHRG received a report, especially of women being used for forced labor. SAC soldiers arrest 3 women and force them to carry load for them and act as human shields until they reach to the KNU control area. In the evening of September 9, the BGF, Border Guard Force, arrest several women in Duplaya district and force them to act as navigator and to lead them to safe road. Instances of lootings, confiscations, and extortion are also increasing. KHRG received multiple reports of SAC soldiers taking food, livestock, and equipment from villagers in Papong district. There has been a rise in the confiscation of motorbikes and phones while villagers are traveling. In many cases, villagers are required to pay money in order to recuperate their motorbike. In some areas, villagers have also been arrested leading to general insecurity surrounding travels. KHRG also received increasing report of landmine incidents. Only 1 month period, we received 4 cases of landmine incidents. We also received multiple reports of arbitrary and unlawful arrest. On April 13, SEC soldiers arrest 3 villagers, a father, mother, and their daughters in Papon district. While the parents were relieved later that day, but the daughter was held for 2 days prior to relief. In April 29, SEC soldier arrest a 35-year-old man, Papon, and they said they arrest him because he had been communicating with KNU on his phone. In August 30, 5 villagers from Nyaolibin district were arrested again. SEC soldier sent them to army base. Although they were detained overnight, they were neither questioned nor provide any information why they were arrested. The SEC continued to institute legislations and other protocols that enable search and arrest the potential violence international human rights standards. It results now that house owner would be required to report information about their tenants and any rental information under the guise of counter-terrorism measures. So this creates more insecurity around in the city, everywhere in Pan town. Activists and human rights defenders are particularly vulnerable to violence, abuse, and threats by SEC. Participants in CDN's movement have also fled to current state, seeking refuge, as well as those who support and assist them have experienced threats and arrests again. In August, SEC have brought Malaysia into Section 3, 7, and 9 in Pan town to monitor activities, particularly that activists and protesters creating increased fear and insecurity of the local populations. The largest displacements result from the airstrike in Papon and Nyaolibin district in March and April. Thousands of villagers fled to Thai-Burma border, but were pushed back by the Thai authorities. Many villagers were unable to bring any food or supply with them. They also have little measures of they also have little means of setting as adequate shelters, leaving them heavily exposed to the elements. We also see that several pregnant women went into labor in the days following the March airstrikes, having to give birth while feeding and no blanket or clothes to wrap their newborn infants. Aid organizations has also struggled to access those sites. It was reported that the Thai National Security Council did not officially allow NGO, CBO, and UN agency access the affected community. The Thai government cited security and public health reasons and had denied allegations of reformers. KHRG also concerns about that SEC mishandling of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has led to a spike in COVID-19 related death throughout the country, including current state. The decisions of SEC has made about access to resources, service, and information concerning COVID-19 not only led to a crisis, they also have prevented other key actors from helping managing the spread of the virus and address the health need to the people of Myanmar. In current state, the SEC is actively undermining the KNU COVID-19 response policy. KNU strengthens travel restrictions in current state in order to help contain the spread of the virus. But the SEC sent a letter to the KNU disproving because of the potential impact on the movement of the soldier within the region. In July, border guard force troops destroyed a KNU COVID-19 screening checkpoint in the Thom district. These actions by the SEC contributes to the spread of the COVID-19 in rural ethnic area where testing kits and medical service are extremely limited. Our recommendations is to the UN, donors, and other international actors must support and increase the legitimacy of the CBOs and ethnic health and aid providers operating on the ground, since they are the ones more fully capable of providing aid to the local communities so that they may strengthen their service more fully assist the population they serve. The international community must not give any legitimacy to the military junta and should not recognize them in all international forums, including at the current 76 sessions of the UN General Assembly. The Security Council must refer Myanmar to the ICC or set as an ad hoc tribunal to ensure all perpetrators of genocide, war crime, crime against humanity, and mass autocracy are prosecuted, and that justice is attained for the victims and the survivors. The international community must stand firmly in imposing a global embargoes in order to show its oppositions to the military junta and to bring an end to the violence to the military has undertaken against the people of Myanmar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, No Tutu. And finally, we have Kinomar to share an overview of different recommendations that has been made to international community and the calls that the groups have consistently been making to the international community and the UN since the attempted coup on 1st February. Omar.
Thank you so much, Adam. Thanks to all of you for joining us at this gathering. My colleagues, including the Union Minister on Human Rights, Minister Myo, have already laid out not only updating the ground situation, but also laid out the concrete recommendations to the international community and particularly to the UN. So I have not much to add on that, but I would like to add a few other perspectives and also the my observation, which I would like to also recommend to the United Nations. As my colleagues already shared very explicitly, the situation on the ground is beyond breaking point, because we see no sign of the military stopping these atrocities that they are committing. And the human rights and humanitarian catastrophes that Myanmar is facing has multiple fronts and multiple layers that we need the UN and international community to go deeper and join hands with the Myanmar people to solve it. Because at the end, it has been, and it will be for the Myanmar people to handle what is happening to their country. And also they are the future of their country. And that's what we need the UN and international community to invest, but not to legitimize the military or not to be working in partnership with the military, because the reality is there is nothing neutral in working with this murderous military junta in Myanmar. It's also very important for us to see that what is happening in Myanmar has gone beyond than what we have been reporting to you in many years. Now it is like full-blown atrocities committing the international crimes, and that is what it is. Previously, all of you who follow Myanmar know that the human rights situation in Myanmar has never been improved. In particular, 4 years ago, when the Rohingya community faced the genocidal campaign from this same military, it was a very moment that the international community had in their hand to address the issue of to address the issue of the justice and accountability, and they had the opportunity to end the impunity of the military. But the international community were not effective in responding to the genocide against the Rohingya. There were some steps taken particularly by the Human Rights Council that we really appreciate, such as the Human Rights Council not only having the special rapporteur and the High Commissioner started to be reporting to the Council, monitoring the ground situation, but also that there was this fact-finding mission, the fact-finding mission that the Human Rights Council established. The fact-finding mission, at the end of their mission, came up with a very strong, concrete, and practical recommendations. And yet, the international community failed to heed those recommendations from the fact-finding mission. And that was a quite miss, because now, after 3-4 years' time, we're seeing the same military, due to the inaction from the military, from the international community, it's very clear that they are very emboldened for what they are doing, knowing that there is no consequences. And I think this is something that international community will have to look seriously again, more than where they are now. Because in the past 8 months, as Minister Myo already reminded us, there are statements, there are resolutions, but where is the real action to stop the violent atrocities on the ground? That's what we are missing. The people of Myanmar call for the responsibility to protect, because they know that they alone don't have that capacity to protect themselves. And yet, after the international community said no more again, not again, after the genocide against the Rohingya in 2017, and yet the international community failed the Myanmar people again in this crisis time. So now, as Minister Myo said, the people of Myanmar are left with no choice, no option, but to exercise their birthright to protect and defend themselves and their communities. And this is what they are doing at this point. But my very worry is that there is still a window of opportunity for the international community to prevent the nationwide civil war and to prevent further bloodshed in Myanmar. But will they actually act? And that's where we are at this point. Now I'm coming to you with the updates and recommendations, but we know that the time has been so delayed. The internally displaced people's number has way increased in the last 4-5 months, now reaching to 250,000. And the militaries is actually using the aerial attacks on the civilians. And there is no neighboring countries are raising their voice clearly on the military, particularly the ASEAN, to stop this violence. It's very frustrating to see that it's already 5 months now since the ASEAN has actually come up with this 5 points consensus, which is taken by many of the international actors as if this is the roadmap to resolve Myanmar crisis by ASEAN. Our call on the ASEAN, our call on the United Nations and international community is please don't rely on the ASEAN, because ASEAN alone cannot handle the Myanmar crisis. And keep investing in ASEAN is not only delaying the time to stop the violence, but also every day the people's lives are at risk on the ground. We call on the ASEAN to also, we have already called on the ASEAN to comply with the do no harm principle. We don't want any of the regional and international actors' action to do harm to the people than do good for the people. Right now, if I may actually share with you, the special envoy, the most recent appointed ASEAN special envoy, has called for the 4-month ceasefire in the beginning of September, which was immediately agreed by the Myanmar military junta. We all know, knowing of the ASEAN way of doing things, of course, we know the deal was agreed by the military junta prior before making the public announcement. And do you know what that means to the people of Myanmar on the ground? It means this 4-month ceasefire for humanitarian mission by the ASEAN special envoy is the 4 months of the complete crush and annihilation of the junta to the Myanmar people on the ground. That is what it means for the people of Myanmar. In the face of the humanitarian mission, the military will further escalate their attacks against the people. And that is the nuances that international actors and regional actors need to understand who they are dealing with. They are dealing with a criminal gang. It is not a professional military, as most of the countries may say about their militaries. I mean, for Myanmar people, we can say very clearly, the Myanmar military is nowhere near a professional military. And in fact, they are a criminal gang. And now, the past 8 months, people of Myanmar have come together. The Spring Revolution has brought everyone together. That includes also the military and police personnel under the military junta control. They have been joining. They have been joining the people's movement. And this is the first time ever in Myanmar's country's history since independence from British that we have the chance to move forward as a diverse country in the system where everybody will be protected and treated equally, especially for the ethnic minority nationalities who have suffer from the successive military regimes for generations, with this extreme violence that we have been seeing across the country in the last 8 months that has never been new to the ethnic minority communities. Even just a few days ago, on September 18, the military started attack to Tantalang town of Chin State in Western Myanmar. Immediately that they started attacking, shelling, the houses got on fire, and there was a Chin Christian pastor who went to extinguish the fire, was shot and killed, and his wedding finger was cut and his finger looted. And that violence immediately forced about 10,000 people of the residents of the town flee from their home, and humanitarian needs is immense. I'm just giving you the most updated, the most recent case. And like Minister Myo said, there are many villages in central Myanmar, for example, who have those areas have never experienced the armed clashes or the armed conflict, are now being heavily attacked. The whole villages are being attacked. So where is this leading for Myanmar? We are at the verge of completely to become a failed state, or in this full-blown nationwide civil war. And yet the international community still just stood by and watched. So I think it's very serious for us to keep, we're coming to the point of are we even really going to get the support from the United Nations as they set out to be with their mission? The Security Council continue to be completely failing and failing there to protect the people of Myanmar. But we're not giving up. Our Myanmar people, the people on the ground, are not giving up. They know at the end that they are the one who have to protect themselves and who have to save themselves from this military. But the experience speaks. We need the UN to act. So with that, we still would like to see the UN to really act. Immediately now at the General Assembly, there is this discussion on the credential for the current Myanmar Ambassador John Moton to continue to represent Myanmar. We need all of your governments, all the international governments, General Assembly member states, to take the stand with Ambassador John Moton, support him to continue to represent the people of Myanmar. And that is also in a way to show that this ruthless, murderous regime is not to be accepted in any way. That is according to the UN Charter. We're not going anything out of the Charter. So we need that. But also what we need is also the General Assembly to actually invite Secretary General to brief the Myanmar situation. We need the Secretary General to step up and show his leadership to the people of Myanmar. So far, he's been very, very quiet, and his role has been not seeable to us of what his attempts and efforts are. And we need that also to step up. And with that, I would just conclude my remarks here, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you, Adam. Back to you.
Thank you, Omar. Very clearly laying out the consequences of inaction by the international community, and also the action or whatever the ASEAN is doing, the impact of that on the people of Myanmar. We have, unfortunately, Minister Myo has had to leave, but we have a number of questions already coming in. Perhaps we can take few, I think, follow up from what Omar you just mentioned about the role of the Secretary General of UN. There are a few questions related to the role of the Secretary General. What more should the Secretary General do? Or do you think that the Secretary General should visit the region and get more directly involved in the Myanmar crisis? You've already touched on this, but perhaps if you could elaborate. There's also a related question on what do you hope from the new UN Special Envoy? The current Special Envoy's term is coming to an end fairly soon, and we believe a new Special Envoy will be appointed by the Secretary General. So what would also be your expectations from a new Special Envoy? Omar, perhaps do you want to?
Sure, Adam. Thank you very much for this question. So yes, as I said, we really want to see the Secretary General step up with his leadership to address the Myanmar crisis. What we mean by is that, yes, definitely he should be actually traveling to Asia, to ASEAN, to Myanmar, and he should be directly in communication with the military junta, not through the special envoy, but directly call on. In the past, even not in this gravity of the crisis and violence time, in the past, under the previous military regime, the previous Secretary Generals actually had the direct communication with the military regime at that time. Why not now, when the crisis is so immense on the ground? So yes, we would like him to take that role. And we would like for him to also call on the Security Council. And he should be briefing. He should be also briefing to the General Assembly. Yes, we are aware of the Assistant Secretary General on humanitarian travel to Myanmar recently, but this is not enough. The way how the missions are conducted is not enough to address the issue or bring tangible results to the people of Myanmar on the ground. We have called on the UN coordinated humanitarian response. We have called on the UN to dispatch a delegation immediately. That was since a few months back already. And now we saw this Assistant Secretary General delegation travel to Myanmar. But why are we not hearing directly from the UN as the people of Myanmar or as the National Unity Government, directly from the Secretary General's office of what they are intending to do? Why cannot be transparent? Why cannot be also all the stakeholders have a chance to engage with the Assistant Secretary General delegation on the humanitarian, especially if anybody really has a hands-on how the humanitarian crisis is to be addressed effectively? Nobody should be leaving the local actors out from this picture. Nobody. So we need the Secretary General to step up, showing us that he can really do this, not by only delegating to the other good officers, but he himself taking the lead. That's what we want to do. We want to see. In that, the new special envoy, what do we expect? To be very honest, we do have a high expectation, and also we hope first the new special envoy will engage with us. This is something that was missed in the previous time. We need the new special envoy to engage with us, open her door or his door to us immediately once he or she takes the position. That's the only way that he or she will be able to find a solution together with the people of Myanmar. this is something that we need, and also the special envoy will need to actually engage with all the other actors, including not only the UN country team, but also with the special rapporteur. But also, I think it's so important that he or she will actually act as a bridge between the people of Myanmar and the other actors, try to open the doors rather than being a gatekeeper, which is something that we don't want to see again. So yeah, that's what will be my response to this question. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. Do any of the other speakers, No Tutu or Dr. Troy, have anything to add on this question?
I believe Mark Siamama Kioma already had answer for this, so I have no other information to add on.
Thank you. We have a question from Jim Marr from EU Parliament. What concrete actions from the European Parliament, including the European Union, including the European Parliament, would help the people of Myanmar? Perhaps not Tutu, do you want to start? You are on mute. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like our recommendations, please recognize NUG and don't recognize SAC, and support the humanitarians directly to the CBO and the UN agency and other aid provider who are working or serving people directly. This is our recommendation to the EU Parliament. And also the other recommendations that we give the international community must stand firmly in imposing a global embargo in order to show its oppositions to the military junta and to bring the end to the violence that military committed. This is our recommendations to the EU. Thanks.
Thank you. Dr. Troy, would you like to add anything on this question?
Yes, thank you, Omar, Ken Omar, and Omar Tutu for your speech and excellent and explicit answers. As from speaking from the view of the doctors, I believe it's really important for the international organizations to put pressure on the military junta in every possible way and take effective measures against them so that they stop purposely attacking the medical professional and the sick, because we sincerely want to provide the necessary care to the injured and save lives. And the patient themselves should be able to seek medical attention without the concern for their own security concern. That's from my side of view. Thank you very much.
Adam, if I may also add a few points in response to the concrete actions from the EU and the European Parliament. I want to also express my appreciation to the European Parliament for coming up with a resolution after the military's attempted coup and violence started. But I must say that there is a big piece is missing, which has to be also, we encourage the EU actors to make it as a focal, the focus action point, which is the targeted sanctions against the military, their family members, their businesses, and their associates and crony businesses. But also, we need the EU to look into how they can really push for this global arms embargo, or the arms embargo from different members and partners, because we know not only the heavy arms, but also like technology and dual use goods are being sold to the military junta, where these are all used against the people. So I think that is why we keep calling for the 3 cuts, One cut is the financial to the military, targeted sanctions. The other cut is the arms. So this is something that we would like the EU to take the step, because yes, EU also thanks for taking up to impose sanctions on the military conglomerates like MEC and MEHL, the two largest military business enterprises. But that's not enough right now, because some of the lucrative businesses of the state, the Myanmar people, the Myanmar state, such as like oil and gas sector, is now under the control of the military. And oil and gas sector is where the billions of dollars will go, instead of going for the people to the civilian government for the people. This is now going to be, it is under the military. So we need the targeted sanctions, also targeting such lucrative businesses. That includes also like gem industry, for example. So these are the things that we would like for the EU to take further step, but also immediately in the next week or next 2 days or 2 weeks or in 2 months, this credential issue in the General Assembly right now, we would like for the EU to really prepare in case of any adversary or disturbance comes. We need the EU collectively to take a stand for the Ambassador Jomoton and for Myanmar people. And I think one thing, the next thing that I want to propose is when it comes to the humanitarian, of course, EU has always been at the forefront to addressing the humanitarian situation in Myanmar, as well as the development. But the EU financial, what do you call, like a grant and funding guidelines are quite rigid for a country like Myanmar, where the Myanmar people are facing such immense, like daily threat and violence. The civil society in Myanmar is under complete attack at this point, that we need the donor governments to really look how they can actually make an alteration or adjustment or temporary adjustment to ensure that Myanmar people, Myanmar civil society, local humanitarian organizations have access to the resources, so that they do the best that they can for the people that they're serving on the ground. As much as, like when they are facing this risk, they are risking their lives, but they need, without the support, they won't be able to do as much. And I think, like when I talk to some of the international humanitarian actors, they ask me like, oh, what are we going to do? Because the donor governments have this and that policy and that regulations. Well, my point here is, here I am speaking publicly directly to you, while I also encourage the international humanitarian actors, INGOs, to also join hands with the Myanmar people in this call for the localization of the humanitarian, with the leadership in equal partnership in the leadership of the Myanmar people, making the grants and resources flexible for the people, so that your support reach directly to the people. And that's what we are looking for. And we hope that you will be able to do the necessary adjustment as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Omar. We have some time for a few more questions. So there are some questions about the positions of some individual states, like Australia. What are your reactions to Australia's position on the coup? And also there's another question related to what do you think of the role of China in de-escalating the atrocities of the junta? And then more broadly on what could individual countries do in their bilateral relations with Myanmar? And how should embassies in Yangon act in reaction to the coup? Perhaps we can start with Dr. Troy this time. Any reactions?
Maybe Tutu?
Yeah, Tutu, do you want to go?
Yes, I would like to answer some part of the questions. The individual country, especially the consulate, embassy in Myanmar have to be very careful, not giving any legitimacy to the military junta for any work. We need to know the embassy position clearly, and also for the people of Myanmar, and need to respect people of Myanmar voice. And for the ASEANs, that they want to support like re-elections. That is not what Myanmar people need. That's why embassy in Myanmar have to be very careful about this military junta move. So we need to be careful, and we need support from every embassy to support human rights work and other region. Thanks.
Maybe I can also add a few points.
Yeah.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for this question. So I will start with the Australian government position or the reaction to the coup, the military's attempted coup since February. I would say we are very disappointed in Australian government. It's very disappointing. I have to say that that's not something that we expect. The Australian government has not taken any concrete action to denounce or reject the military, and also other like US, EU, and UK has taken up the very concrete steps like targeted sanctions. We haven't seen the Australian government take into that, in spite of the Australian parliamentarians and the Myanmar diaspora in parliament in Australia and the Australian civil society, all together are calling for it. The Australian government is not listening to not only to the people of Myanmar, but also to their own legislation, which is very disappointing. But saying that, I hope the Australian government will not be left behind in this coordinated effort that we are calling for, because what we see is the Australian government, when it comes to the ASEAN, when it comes to the ASEAN humanitarian agency, AHA Center, we see that Australian government immediately jump on to support. But then the reality that we've been telling since the Rohingya crisis, we've been telling to the Australian mission that relying on AHA Center will never solve the problem on the ground. So I think this is something that we feel quite disappointed, to be honest. But saying that, I really hope that the Australian government will hear our voice. When it comes to the China role, well, what can we say about China? Of course, we want China to take the side with the people, but that history has spoken that they have never done it. But at this point, what will happen to Myanmar if Myanmar has become a complete failed state? Will that really serve the China's interest? Absolutely no. And I think this is the time China must realize that they have also no option as the largest neighbor, but to take side with the Myanmar people, because at the end, in the long run, for the generations to come, from both sides of the country, both countries, it is going to be the people to people. It's not going to be a group of criminal gang of the military who will carry on for this country's future. So I think China needs to realize that. And I'm sure you heard from the news that the China and the US government and US and China reached a deal when it comes to the credential issue in the General Assembly. Well, we don't know what is the real deal behind, if that is one made. But what we know for sure is that if China don't take the side with the people this time, China is going to lose Myanmar people forever. I mean, they have lost a lot, as much as the ASEAN has lost. Myanmar people have no faith in those neighboring countries, including India and also particularly ASEAN and China. So I think that China still has a chance to show that they are really the good neighbor if they are. So I think I'm just like the next couple of weeks or the couple of months with the credential issue, that is the litmus test. That is a litmus test for Myanmar people to see who are really with the Myanmar people and who are really with the human rights and peace and stability and democracy. So we will see how China will actually behave and respond. Thank you for that. And then my next response to your question on the bilateral government, I would say, let me come back to the 3 points of 3 strategy action point that we call for from all of the individual and the collective coordinated effort. One is to cut the financial flow to the military. And individual governments can do with the targeted sanctions and also imposing sanctions on the individual military and their family members as well, cutting their privileges as well. So that's one thing. And the other is also the cutting the impunity, meaning like if you see, for example, a country like Argentina, there is a case at the Argentina court to exercise the universal jurisdiction. It is in the process right now. Is still in the process, but the universal jurisdiction, those countries individually who can apply universal jurisdiction should apply to ensure these perpetrators of the international crimes are actually held to account with your domestic law that is applying the universal jurisdiction. So that is important. And the other is, of course, we want to see the global arms embargo. And that is something individual governments can also do by calling on your businesses or those domiciled in your country to stop doing the business, stop selling arms, also divest from the military. So that is important for us to see. The embassies in Myanmar has a very instrumental role. And we know there are limitations and challenges, but please also know that our Myanmar people have given up everything and taken their life at risk, for their better future that you aim to be serving with your diplomatic relationship, taking the base in our country. And your responsibility is to protect the people, to protect the people of Myanmar and their well-being. It has to be the first. The embassies in Myanmar, you are also the day-to-day on the ground to ensure your capitals are well informed. And we hope that you will ensure the people of Myanmar's voices from the ground are well informed and directly transmitted to the capitals. And this is something we need. And in fact, I want to just come back to the special envoy. The new special envoy, what we really need is, including for the new special envoy and all of these international actors, to really listen to the Myanmar people. I'm sorry to say that in the last 10 years, they have failed to listen to the Myanmar people, including the special envoy. They have failed to listen to the Myanmar people. And that's the very reason of seeing where we are at this point. And I think this is important that from now on, Myanmar people are the leadership of this country. They are the ownership of this country, and their voices must be the policy. That's what I will suggest. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Dr. Troy back with us now. Perhaps on the last question, especially if you could share any thoughts. What would you recommend to individual countries do in their bilateral relations with Myanmar, and how should embassies in Yangon act, and particularly how Western countries should be supporting the anti-coup movement, but also want to ensure their presence and access in the country? Dr. Troy.
Yes, thank you very much. Like I've said before, we are doctors, we are not politicians, but from the side of doctors, the State Administration Council is committing the crimes against humanity, and the atrocities are still continue to be happening across the nation. So if this impunity is not
We seem to have lost you again.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, this impunity will embolden the Tamador to keep committing the crimes against humanity widely and systematically across the nation. So we would like to recommend the individual countries and the embassies and the international community to respect and recognize the democratically elected government instead of the military junta. And it is really important to provide the aid and all kinds of help without legitimizing or promoting credibility to the junta. Instead of the junta, the international community should be directly communicate with the NGOs, or ethnic health committees and trusted local networks to deliver the aid. Because in July, when the UNHCR trying to trying to send the humanitarian aid to Myanmar, all these aids were denied by the military junta. The humanitarian aid to the vulnerable people in the those who are displaced are denied by the military junta. These aids only go to the people in the city area. So it's really important from the international community to work directly with the trusted organizations and NGOs to deliver these aids directly to reach to those, to deliver the aids directly to those in need. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We have come almost to an end of this event, but before we conclude, I would like to ask each panelist to share your final thoughts, especially since this event is being held in the context of the updates by the Special Rapporteur and the High Commissioner today and tomorrow. If you have any specific recommendations to both the Special Rapporteur and also the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the High Commissioner herself, and also the Human Rights Council and other UN bodies, on what more they can do to respond to the ongoing crisis in Myanmar, and any final concluding remarks. Perhaps we can start with Dr. Troy again.
Yes, my final comment will be: one day without adequate healthcare is one more day with unnecessary and preventable deaths. So the people dying are just not just nobody, they are our country's future generations, parents of these children, and the people that are contributing to the country in their own ways. So it's important from these people to get medical care without any fear, and for the medical professionals to provide the care whenever and wherever needed. So the international community must maintain a concerted effort to stop the targeted attacks on the healthcare system, facility, and personnel as soon as possible, and ensure the full implementation of UN Resolution 2286, which is protection of civilians in armed conflict. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Troy. Tutu?
I just want to repeat the same recommendation. International community must stop military junta from the violations to the end, to the Myanmar people. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Omar. Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. I will join Dr. Troy and Tutu also in their calls. Just to add a couple of points is that we would like for the international community to recognize the national unity government, but also work with the national unity government. And that includes the COVID task force. It's a joint task force between the national unity government and the ethnic health organizations when it comes to the humanitarian and the COVID situation. And we would like for the Human Rights Council and also the Special Rapporteur and High Commissioner. We thank their great work, great contribution. We would like them to not only keep monitoring and reporting, but also we would like for the High Commissioner OECHR office to also look into what could materially and practically that they can lend support to the Myanmar human rights defenders and human rights organizations on the ground, but also we would like for the Human Rights Council to council members also to support the IIMM to have the ground access. Of course, not in the country, but we know that. But regionally, in the neighboring countries, IIMM should have a chance to have a presence in the region. I mean, especially now, why not? I congratulate appreciate and recognize the Human Rights Council's efforts have gone as far as they could, including coming up with not only the FFM setup, but also the IIMM setup. But I think at this point, for IIMM to have access to the ground as close as possible to Myanmar people is really important. So we need the member states to actually support that, but also to actually member states to encourage and convince the neighboring countries to open their borders to save Myanmar people's lives. That is to including receiving those who are fleeing from the military violence, as well as also to get the COVID and the humanitarian aid into the people in Myanmar. So that would be my recommendation. And thank you so much, Adam, for your moderation, and Forum Asia for organizing this.
Thank you. With that comes to the close of this event. And again, on behalf of Forum Asia and Progressive Voice, we would like to thank all the panelists, especially Minister Ong Myo Min, who had to leave a bit early, but for joining us and sharing the perspectives of the NUG, and also for Notutu, Dr. Troy, and Omar for very clearly laying out the situation on the ground, and also the cost of inaction by the international community for the people of Myanmar. I don't think we can make it any clearer. It is now up to international community to act. And also for all the participants for very actively taking part in this discussion by sending questions on different platforms. Although we are not able to get to all the questions, we hope the discussions today provided some insights into how the international community can contribute to the work of the human rights defenders on the ground. Thank you again, and have a good day.
Thank you.